Welcome everybody to our conversation today. I'm Eric Chemi, SVP here at Bospar, and today I'm joined by Laurence Evans, the founder and CEO of Reputation Leaders. He's our big star of the show, talking about thought leadership, our big survey report, all the analysis that we've done, Bospar and Laurence's team at Reputation Leaders working on it together. I'm also joined today by Lisa Morgan. It's our genius content person here at Bospar, the smartest person in the room whenever she's in the room. And of course, Curtis Barr, the Spar in Bospar, our principal, our trusted leader as we all head to the North Star. So thanks everybody for joining me today. The topic is thought leadership, and I'm going to start off with you, Laurence. I was blown away. The stat, 97% of executives surveyed said thought leadership has a moderate or high ROI. So basically, everybody thinks there's a pretty good ROI from thought leadership. It almost seems too high. It seems too good to be true. Laurence, do you believe this 97% number?
Yeah, I absolutely believe it. I mean, I wouldn't be in business for the last 10 years doing it if it wasn't true. I think it's even more compelling when you think about who consumes thought leadership. So when you've got 84% of executives consuming thought leadership weekly, how else do you get in the boardrooms in the C-suite of American companies? Genuine thought leadership does that. And so I read a stat that said, average content marketing generates a $5 return for every $1. Well, that's similar to thought leadership, but what makes thought leadership different is it actually creates conversation. It's distinctive, it builds awareness, it gets people talking, it gets people engaged, and it creates real business value. And interesting enough, it creates business value not only for the organizations, but one of the things executives told us is that it creates value for them. It builds their personal brand. It makes them smart. It makes them feeling like they're up with the trends. They've got something new to talk about. So I absolutely believe it. In fact, what was even more compelling was that 54% of those who were at the very top of the organization said it had a very high ROI. So it seems like the higher you are, the more executive you are, the more you are likely to see the benefit of thought leadership. But yeah, I think it's compelling.
If that's true, Curtis, shouldn't every company be doing thought leadership? If it's this successful, are we not doing enough of it?
I mean, is that the softball question? Yes.
It seems a little, as I'm saying it, I'm like, it feels like I'm selling used cars over here. Like I'm setting you up for too easy. Well, give me the straight talk then, right? Like we know not everybody believes in it, but the data suggests that it's this good. Laurence is saying the only way to reach the absolute top decision makers, the best way to reach them is this. And yet we see companies not spending enough money in this way, not putting enough resources, cutting back in these ways. Why isn't everybody doing it? Do they just not believe it? Are they not seeing success from their efforts of doing it?
First of all, I'm delighted you asked me to give you the straight talk. That I mean, webinars and stuff are so uptight. This is the one moment of levity, I think. But I think when you're looking at why don't they do more thought leadership, I believe the answer is about their desired outcomes. More so than ever right now, marketers are being pressed to make sure that sales happen. And sales and thought leadership aren't a total overlap of the Venn diagram. There is some separation there, because when you're talking about thought leadership, you're talking really high level. You're not talking like buy. And so that's the disconnect here, is that thought leadership is not seen as almost a call to action as certain salespeople would need it to be.
I just love the fact, as a math guy, that Curtis does a Venn diagram. I think that's compelling. The other thing is that there is a lot of thought leadership, but many companies don't do it well. And that's the challenge, right? You've got to do it well. It's got to be new. It's got to be innovative. It's got to be different. It's got to be distinct. It's got to be provoking. And actually, to do thought leadership well, it's quite hard, because there's a lot of companies that produce a lot of volume, like the big four, but not many companies produce stuff that you go like, oh, this is good thought leadership. I need to read this.
We've talked about this, Lisa. So many companies, they're trying to put the stuff out there, but it looks like an ad. And it goes back to what Curtis is saying, that everyone is trying to get that ROI immediately, right? I spent this much money and I need to see this much amount of return in sales directly as a result of this piece of content. And then there's too much, directive that this just needs to start selling product. It starts to look like an ad. how do you avoid that? How do you even define what's an ad and what's thought leadership, right? Where does it start to fall off the cliff before it's just useless thoughts and not leadership, and it's just more, again, of a direct sales pitch?
That's a great question, Eric. And the answer to that is when you're creating thought leadership, what you want to do is focus on issues and trends. And there's such a propensity to focus on what we're doing. We have this partnership. We have these great products. We have this strategy that we want to talk about. Well, I can tell you, as a former editorial decision maker, I'm not here to act as a cheerleader for your company. My job is to—
Wait, you're not? They don't want to hear that.
My audience will not tolerate it because I'm talking about the C-suite and CIOs, right? And you really need to get their attention by giving them a solution. Instead of focusing on what you want to say, you need to think about what do they need to hear. And
how do you get them to let go, take the softer touch, where they want to write, they're like, you have to buy my product, that's the answer? How do you get them to spend time, money, effort, resources into not making that final push? Because they're putting a lot of their own time, resources into doing this. And it's hard for them to say, well, I'm not getting that final mile. I'm not getting that final ask in that document.
Okay. The easy answer is focus on issues and trends. Be part of the conversation. Start a conversation. If you see something out there that you disagree with, or you agree with, or concur with, right? Say something, right? But don't prioritize what it is that you want to do. Again, focus on your audience. And all of the features that I used to write were completely focused on issues and trends. And one of the things that I did is I went directly to a lot of the big four companies and their competitors because they could help me tell a story.
Who are the big four for those listening that don't know?
Oh, you're talking about, Deloitte and EY and Capgemini and those kinds of companies.
The integration consultants.
Yes, exactly. They're systems integrators and consultants. The great thing about them is they have not only helped companies implement in your industry, but they also have visibility because they work in all kinds of industries. So they can bring you ideas from other industries. And that's one of the reasons why they do so much thought leadership themselves. They're trying to educate audiences. Not everyone can afford these companies, right? So what you need to do is, pay attention, right, to what people are saying. And again, focus on solutions. How can I help that audience? What is it? You
mentioned the big four.
Yeah.
And then we have a data point, and I'll bring Laurence in on this, that people, they tend to want to get their thought leadership from the big tech companies like the IBM or the Salesforce. They don't really want to hear about it from the Deloittes of the world. And I know, getting ready for this, Lisa disagreed with that. Lisa's like, not in my experience. I don't think so. I want to hear from, the guys, the Deloitte types, not the big tech companies, because they're too much of a sales pitch. So Laurence, what do you think that is? And then I'm going to let Lisa just directly argue with you about that.
Okay, that sounds a plan. You may remember we've come out of something called COVID that changed the way the world worked, changed the way we use technology. A whole lot of companies on the back of that are still going through and trying to implement a digital revolution. It's now being accelerated by AI and ChatGPT. And the answer is technology is changing everything we do. And because technology is a broad compass, it means that every company and every audience, every consumer is impacted to some extent by technology. So it's not surprising that the topics that people are interested in will have a technology flavor because A, it's new, it's exciting, it's future, it's delivering ROI, but it's also because no one wants to be left behind in the digital transformation. And that's why it grabs people, because no CEO, CIO, CFO wants to be thought dumb. Everyone wants to be thinking like, I'm smart, I'm on top of the latest trends. And so that's my view of why they focus on that kind of thought leadership, because they think that, well, they need to. It's what I need to do to be strategic, to be smart, to be future focused.
Yeah, I found that result to be actually counterintuitive, Eric, with them reading more from the big tech vendors as opposed to the leading consultants out there. Because when I was a journalist, I wrote features, and my go-to, because I'm focusing on issues and trends, is, for the reasons I stated earlier, the large consultant firms, because they don't talk about what they're doing so much in terms of, oh yeah, we have this new innovation. Sometimes they do, but to a much lesser extent than a vendor. A vendor sometimes wants to hijack a conversation and not answer the questions that you asked, or take the conversation in a different direction. And when you have an angle that you're supposed to pursue and your editor wants you to do that, you need to do that.
Curtis.
So can I argue with a
jump
little
in,
bit with
Laurence.
Lisa a little bit just on that? Because one of Bospar's own clients, right, the CEO of Deal Trade, said a lot of what passes for thought leadership is not really thought leadership. It's just recycling, retreading existing ideas. It's literally just summarizing what's already out there. And to be honest, whether you're a KPMG or Deloitte, or whether you're a Amazon or Google, you've got to come out with something fresh and something new. And too much of thought leadership out there is just recycling existing ideas and existing conversations. It doesn't say anything new.
That's so hard though, right? We say that, and I'll bring Curtis in. Oh, it needs to be fresh. It needs to be new. It needs to be different. It can't be recycled. This is hard, right? That I need to be original. And we all grew up, we had to do homework, and none of the homework was original. It's like, all right, as long as you can find the answers were somewhere in the book, right? A history report. It's already happened. There was nothing original that you could say. So Curtis, do you find there is this gap between an understanding from content creators, what is real thought leadership and what is not? My guess is you've been in a few meetings with clients trying to hit them over the head saying, this is not good enough. You have to stop wasting your time going in this direction.
I'm inspired by the great PR guru, Whitney Houston, who gave us a moment in time. And the idea is that thought leadership, in order to be impactful and new, really should reference what's happening right now. If you do it so broadly, it's going to be very much generic, repetitive. It's not going to have a flavor of the moment. And so I find that thought leadership that references current events, or even looks into the future at events that are about to happen and about to come, it is a lot more interesting and authentic and original than just thought leadership that doesn't have any of those specifics. And so that's what I would advocate for anyone looking for a thought leadership program is, yeah, you want to aim high, but you really need to aim at your surroundings too, because otherwise you're just talking with a bunch of mashed potatoes in your mouth. It might be high meaning, but it doesn't mean anything.
What's specific? What's of the moment right now? So it's August 2023. AI is a good example. It's been around for like this new thing, almost a year. There's a lot of general things that we can talk about. It will affect people's jobs. No, it won't replace you. It'll just replace the parts of the jobs you don't like. Like, we hear all these things.
Right, but what
What's
about
of
AI,
the moment?
how it will impact the next iPhone, for example? What are people looking for there? How will AI play into Apple's upcoming new goggles? And thinking about how AI might impact, the 2023 Christmas season, or even the 2023 Thanksgiving season. These are things that are, discrete moments in time that people have thoughts about, that people are preparing for, that content creators, PR people, strategists can all work behind, because that's going to be the big story each and every month. I think the biggest problem with AI is that a lot of the thought leadership content that you alluded to is too general, to Skynet and killing people, to taking jobs. And it's not focused enough on really the specifics of, like, let's say generative AI, and what are the hallmarks of generative AI content this month. And I find that when you get into real specifics, like talking about how there have been problems noticed with some AI models, and some of them are actually becoming stupider, that's a bit more interesting than the general mishmash of stuff that's kind of milquetoast.
You can also get your hand caught in the cookie jar too if you reuse content, because from an editorial perspective, we will look for plagiarism. And even if it's on your site and you're recycling a blog or something, I'm sorry, we want something original.
So you guys would look for that.
Yeah, and AI is a good example because it's something that people don't agree on. And to Curtis's point, it needs to be topical, but it needs to be topical where there's a genuine debate, where there's different sides. There are some people who think, including AI experts, this is the end of the world, and others are saying, no, this is the beginning of the world. It's just like a new internet age. And the fact that people disagree is interesting.
You make a good point. Disagreement is probably better for thought leadership because it engages a debate. It gets people to pick a side. It gets you to think more critically on it, as opposed to, let's call it the professor's lecture in college, where it's just like, I'm just going to monologue to you. There is no debate. This is what it is. Memorize it. It feels like too much thought leadership, or too many attempts at thought leadership, are more in that second gap of just like, I'm just going to lecture you on something, but I'm not leaving open any opportunity for someone to disagree with me, because I, as the writer, I'm too nervous at being wrong, right? I don't want disagreement because I'm not sure that's going to help sales. How do you get people to get over that, Laurence?
Well, and this is just a perfect setup for Curtis again, because the whole point of having a conversation is, where do people want to consume it? And the answer is they want to consume it face-to-face predominantly. They want to be in conferences or places where they can talk about it, discuss it, and they get more out of the debate than they do out of as much as the issue itself. You extend that to social media. Social media is a place where people like to consume thought leadership because it allows them to have a conversation. And it's interesting that YouTube, which is one of the top channels, is actually introducing debates or places where you can, it's evolved from TED Talk to now live conversations. So I think Twitter is another example. The places where thought leadership is being debated are actually the places where genuine conversations are happening. And
I was going to get into the YouTube and the Twitter, all that in one thing, but just before we get there, the last thing in this area, how do we measure proper ROI, right? We said, okay, the ROI is, high, moderate, let's say it's 5 to 10, 10 to 15%. Maybe this is a question for Laurence, question for Lisa. When someone has their thought leadership out there, how do they say, okay, this particular piece of content was worth X% in ROI, or at least my program of thought leadership over the course of the year was worth 12%. How do you actually measure that? How do you go back to somebody to say, prove that this was worth it?
Well, first of all, measurement is always, almost by definition, what was your goal and did you reach it? So in our survey of executives, we asked them, why does your organization produce thought leadership, and what's the purpose and how do you consume it? And half of them said it's to be a leading voice in the industry. So leadership is key. Secondly, 42% said it was to generate awareness, and 39% said it's to generate new business leads. So the thing about thought leadership is it acts all the way down the funnel. Predominantly it's to drive awareness and differentiation, but it also drives essentially influence and engagement. How do you measure it? You have to measure all of those things. Yes, you can measure reach and awareness, but reach and awareness is not ultimately the measure. The ultimate measure is, have you influenced someone else because you've done the thought leadership? And in particular, are you more respected?
I'm going to stop you there. I think that's a key point. It's not about reach and awareness. It's, did you actually influence somebody? Did you get them to change their mindset, make a different decision? You could reach 1 billion people. You can make 1 billion people aware, but if you change nobody's mind and influence 0 people, then maybe it wasn't worth it.
Agree?
Yeah. One of our clients actually said, thank you so much for writing this Forbes article, because people have been coming to me as a result of it. They made comments, they reached out. That was great.
What do you say, Lisa, when you're working on something now on the agency side on a piece of content and the client says, okay, but I need to measure ROI for this? What do you tell them?
Well, there's a number of ways that you can do it, but I can tell you first that thought leadership is not an event. You don't just place one piece and then you're done and you're supposed to be happy with it.
We know that, but my guess is a lot of clients don't know that, or they're still on your case. Like, I did this. This was my budget. How do you measure this one thing?
Right. Exactly. So there's ways of measuring it. Part of it is share of voice. It becomes part of share of voice. You can also measure it like in terms of ad space. What do you want to do there? But more, and that's those measurements are not really where you want to go. What you want to do is you want to help move your business forward, right? You want to join the conversation, but at the same time, you want to raise the visibility of your company and your executives, right?
That could take a while. It might
That
be
takes
months
quite a
down the
while.
line.
And so what you see is when you do regular, you want to get into a regular cadence of doing things. And that is true for PR. That is true for marketing. It's getting out there and, talking to your audience and making them want to come to you. That's the whole point.
Curtis, how do you convince clients to keep up with that cadence, right? Okay, you may not see measurable success with that first piece of thought leadership, but keep doing more of it, right? Don't stop because it didn't seem like an all-star effort. You need to do this every week. You need to do this 10, 20, 30, 40 times every week.
The thing about thought leadership is it's part of a PR program. And much like a diet, you need to have a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Sometimes it's your protein, sometimes it's your fiber. And so thought leadership, you need to make a regular effort for it because your competitors are doing it too. And so that means that you need to have thoughtful programs that can also benefit the other parts of your programs where maybe there is a call to action for something. Whereas with the thought leadership program that's being more thoughtful, that's a lot more long tail. And so I find that all PR helps all other PR efforts. And so when you're making the case to your clients, you say, listen, what we want to do is we want to have a thought leadership piece that's going to get the attention of the likes of CNN. We also want to be doing a product effort that's going to get the attention of ZDNet. And maybe what we'll do is we'll tell ZDNet that you were in CNN, and that will make them more excited about what you're doing. And so there is a thought that all roads lead to Rome. And this is just another example of that. And so as long as you're giving everything in context and putting thought leadership as a broad effort that can help everything, I think that will make sure that all the other business mandatories are considered.
You mentioned CNN, ZDNet as examples, but I'm going to go back to now what we were mentioning YouTube and Twitter, because the data shows the number one source, go-to source that executives are sourcing for their thought leadership content is YouTube. Not YouTube I think of as like that's where kids are watching stuff and there's all kinds of whatever, but I don't think of it as corporate executive number one source for thought leadership. So I'm going to bring, Laurence in on that. Do you
Sure.
believe that data? I mean, this is your data, right? Like it's our
it is. And I think, first of all, just to give some context, YouTube is ideal for a world that's visual and mobile, because a lot of companies that are putting thought leadership on their own website are also posting that same thought leadership on YouTube as well. Why is YouTube brilliant? Because YouTube takes that content and it formats it for every possible way that people want to consume. So whether you want to consume it on a tablet or a desktop, whether you're on the go or whatever, it's a lot easier often to consume the very same content that companies are producing on their own website in YouTube because it's designed for essentially and optimized for them. The other thing about YouTube is that it is the second largest search engine after Google, right? A lot of people use YouTube as a search engine. So it's optimized for SEO. Increasingly, companies are atomizing their thought leadership, which means they're taking long form and then they're cutting it into just short bits. And people are quite happy just to consume thought leadership in pieces on YouTube rather than having to sit down and watch the whole 1 hour video. So what's interesting about YouTube, and I pulled out some stats, is 2/3 of people over 56 years are watching YouTube. It's not just young people. People of every generation are watching YouTube, and it's just an easy, snackable format for consuming content on the go.
Lisa, you're a writer by trade. When you hear that video platforms are taking over, how do you compete with that? How do you compete with, okay, does nobody have the attention span to read anymore? Do they all just basically want to watch television, even as their version of learning?
No, that's not true. I mean, people consume different ways, and really that needs to be part of your content strategy, right? You need to recognize that people do consume content in different ways using different media. One of the things is we now have the technology where you can see people on video, it's live, it's real time. For a long time, we didn't have the network connections we needed or the speeds that we needed, the performance, the load balancing, all of that stuff that it takes that we have now. And the younger generations are finding video, right? I mean, they're finding video more normal because they have it, right? Back in the day, we didn't have it so much. So it, might seem counterintuitive that older people think, wow, YouTube is the place that I want to go. But the world is changing and you need to change with it.
But it doesn't feel, Curtis, like YouTube is being prioritized by the companies themselves, right? They're looking at all the other platforms out there. A lot of, like Laurence said, they put it on their own website often. They're still focused on their own website or press releases, but it doesn't feel like we have a lot of conversations where companies say, let's get this up on YouTube.
Well, getting it up on YouTube is, I guess, pretty tactical. I think what's more strategic is how you get people to view the link you put up that goes to YouTube. I think that's the thing. And I think that if I was a salesperson who was trying to get people to watch this available on YouTube, there'd probably be a email that'd go out to prospects saying, hey, so-and-so, we've been talking about thought leadership. Eric and Lisa had this great point. You could watch it here, or you could watch what Laurence had to say about this. And it's creating a venue, but people don't go into YouTube without an agenda. And the thing that PR people need to do is they need to set that agenda. And so do salespeople, marketing too. And that's why you're going to see, for example, a lot of video content that's going to appear on social networks that will either go take you back to YouTube or be, video that's inherent within the platform itself. And so we need to think that the bigger message isn't so much YouTube. The bigger message is that people want to consume their thought leadership and a video chunk perhaps as an entry drug, a gateway drug, and then go down a channel so that they could get smarter and smarter about the things that matter to them the most.
I think what Laurence says is a good point too. The search engine powers. Obviously, Google owns YouTube. That YouTube itself is its own search engine, right? You go on there if you have a question about something, boom, there's a video. There's 100 videos about that topic. And I think about in our world, a lot of B2B tech, you can really get in the weeds. You can go down the rabbit hole very quickly on YouTube. And there are so many independent content creators, random people that don't work for these companies, but they have a point of view. They have an explanation. I don't know why they make these videos. I don't know who they are. I don't know if somebody is paying them to do it. I don't know if they make money doing this, but there's a lot of content and it does spark debate because a lot of it is good. A lot of it is crazy, but it certainly is thought-provoking. You're nodding. I wonder what you're thinking, Laurence.
I'm kind of in Curtis's camp, which is that people love to talk. Well, people love to talk, but people love to talk about thought leadership in a live setting, right? They like to talk about it with other people, but you can't always be at the conference. You can't always be in the room. So there's a catch-up role for YouTube where you can go, you can just view it at whatever time you like and however you like. I think it, as Curtis says, it's just one of a stream of content channels, but it's often what gets people interested. So it might be you might have come in through a Twitter forum, you might have come in through a newsletter, you might have come in, you watch a piece of YouTube content, you go, well, that's interesting, I'll go to the company website. And people really, in a sense, are their own news desk. They're navigating these channels, finding out which types of content they want to view and how they want to view it. YouTube is sometimes the start of the journey, other times it's the end of the journey.
And I do want to point out, like you said, face-to-face discussion and conversation. When you ranked the top ways people actually want to consume it, the only one that was above 50%, 51% face-to-face discussion, that was a preferred, like the most preferred format. And then from there, short form writing, charts or data visualization, then long form writing, long form video. So people do want to do it in person. Like you said, they want to have that debate. They don't want to just, read a book, or they don't want to just be on a singular platform. But I want to get into now the underutilized, overutilized, this gap of where content is being made versus where content wants to be consumed. So, I'll bring you in, Lisa, on this one. We see company websites and unsolicited emails. Those are two very classic areas where we as an industry put a lot of effort into our content, But those are two very obvious areas where we as consumers do not want to read those things. Nobody wants to go to the corporate website because we know it's often a sales pitch, and nobody wants to get the unsolicited, the spam emails that every vendor is sending out. So why do we keep doing that? How do we shift the priorities? And then on the flip side, I'll go the other way. Search engines, like Laurence said, search engines and newsletters, that's where the audience is, but that's not where we're putting a big thought leadership focus. So we put it often on company websites and on unsolicited emails, but people actually want to get it on search engines and newsletters. How do we get companies to shift that?
Well, you have to think about push and pull, right? Increasingly, people want to pull the information, and they can. It's so easy with ChatGPT, with search, with all this stuff to get what it is that you need. You know, what people are trying to do is they're trying to cut through the noise, right? They want to get to the signal of what's that information that it is that I need. So I don't want to go to your website necessarily, right? So search engine, I'm surprised that search engine optimization really has not been given as much thought as possible, but it is kind of its own art. And there's sometimes a disconnect between people who are writing and people who are doing SEO. And with newsletters, you know, and you need to do it, right? Because that helps people cut through that noise. And the other thing is with newsletters are kind of antiquated in some people's minds. And I think they're deprioritizing it because of that. It's not necessarily true. It depends on what you put in your newsletter. Do I really want to read it? So, you know, you just need to think about, again, you know, how are people consuming? What is it that they want to consume? How can you make it easier for people to find you and what you're saying?
And then I'll bring you in on this, Curtis. The number one reason that we saw, according to the data, what business or relationship doors do you think thought leadership opens? The number one was access to experts in the industry. You're rolling your eyes. What are some of the conversations you've had with companies say, look, this is why you need to do this. This is how you're going to get in front of the right people.
You know, I always hear discussions about we need to be in front of the C-levels. We need to be in front of the decision makers. We need to be anticipating what they're thinking. And part of it is an exercise where we say, okay, who are the people that you really want their attention? And what are their big priorities? What are their needs? And also, who are the people who aspirationally want to be those people? Because you want to make sure you're getting the next generation as well. And so it's thinking meaningfully about the various problems they're actually trying to fix and solve, and giving actual consultative content so that they could play their own personal Hari Seldon, if you will. And so that's a Foundation reference for you nerds out there. Any nerds watching, check it out. Foundation, great book, even okay TV series. But I'd like to jump a little bit and say one thing that you have to weigh every bit of good thought leadership is there's what people say they want, and there's what we know they'll like. And I know that's kind of icky, but the fact is that when we did a study involving Hallmark about e-cards, we discovered a lot of things about it. But the thing that we discovered that was kind of like the frosting, if you will, was equal percentages of Americans expected dinner and or sex if they sent an e-card. And that's funny. And while we had all sorts of uptight stats and things about the research, that was the stat that sold. Now, conversely, in a kind of Freudian way, we did a similar study where we discovered New Yorkers were most likely to shop on their phones during funerals. And again, you know, sex and death. But the thing is, that motivated clicks. So when you're thinking about your thought leadership, yes, think about what your people want. Think about the actual very detailed issues that they're trying to face. Think about moments in time that are real and not just like far out there. But also think about the kind of human nature aspects that your research isn't just so heavy-handed with stats and figures and, you know, thought leadership. But it also has things that are kind of light and fun and will drive clicks. Because if you just do one or the other, you're not going to get your audiences motivated and excited by what you have to share with them.
I agree. I don't have a disagreement from there. I'm curious. I'm looking at everybody else. is there something we've said so far today? Is there something somebody said that we have a disagreement with? I'm looking at Lisa, I'm looking at Laurence, Curtis. Did you hear something that you need to come back to and make your argument?
Well, I think so I will push back on Curtis a little bit, because I think, I mean, obviously fun and sexy is all good. But thought leadership is authentic. It is credible. It is thoughtful. It is topical. It is memorable. You don't always have to be funny to get there, but when you're promoting it, it really does help to get people's attention. And that's why thought leadership bridges better to earned media than it does to paid media. But yeah, there is a place for serious thought leadership. It doesn't always have to be funny, but it certainly helps to lighten the mood.
I would say fun would be a word in italics. And that would be that it is something that you didn't expect, or it's something that's slightly unusual. The problem is that we're inundated with research. We are inundated with reports. And the problem with many of these reports is they feel and sound the same. And in order for your report not to necessarily be effective for executives, but to get the kind of attention that's going to make you stand out of the pack, you need to think of that quirky, interesting thing. Now, I'm not saying it has to be, channeling your inner, seventh grader, but it does have to be something that gets a human response. Like, whoa, I didn't think about that. And do it in such a way that you don't trigger someone's BS alarms. Because one of the things that Eric brought to me was when he was at CNBC and he'd get hit by research, he'd get a lot of research that would trigger your sniff test. And Eric, not to suddenly take, the moderator control and, foist it upon myself, but could you just kind of talk about that? I mean, here you are at Bloomberg, here you are at CNBC, you're getting pounded with research, and yet only some of it got your attention and some of it, got ahead.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you remembered that. I think I remember it as there were two sides of problematic data or thought leadership, let's say. The stuff that we all know, right? So then it's not news. And it's just like, this is stuff that we all agree on. It's not news. No one's going to write about it because everybody in the world knows it, agrees it. This is nothing. Then there's the stuff that's so fantastical. Maybe it's true, but it's hard to believe. It's hard to consume. It's hard to digest. And I'm not going to be able to get an editor to approve me doing this story. Like, it's so far out. It's like, it's at the moon, right? So what I found was the best research that succeeded was arm's length, right? Like I can reach it. It's accessible. The phrase I remember was, I don't know it yet, but I almost already know it, right? It's just one incremental bit of news away. It's one little piece of information that when I hear it, I believe it. Like, aha, I thought that might be true, but I didn't know. But now I've confirmed it. Those little incremental bits I found had the best success because you could get more clicks for it. You could get people that it confirms something that they were, stereotyping or believing. I think that's where we found that middle ground of success.
The thing is that when I think of what placements have succeeded for my clients, it's been the things that have a spoonful of sugar to make the medicine go down. And that has helped tremendously. And I also work with the sales teams, and I'll say, okay, now that we've secured the story, here's how to sell this story so that it hits back at your actual sales targets. I also like to impanel sales executives when I'm even starting to work on a process with Laurence, for example, and say, okay, we want to do a thought leadership story. What are the things that you tell your prospects that help close deals? And they walk me through their pitch. And then I say, do you use any numbers to back up or support your claims? And they'll say, yeah, I use some. And I'll say, what are they? And I say, well, and usually the usual suspects come out, Gartner, IDC, et cetera. And I say, what if we took all the kind of stats that you are using to support your case and make you own them yourself? Wouldn't that be so much stronger if you were citing research that you yourselves commissioned and that you yourselves owned? And that way you had the entire narrative. And so walking with the sales team through that process and getting their thoughts on the sort of stats that are going to be powerful for them to close a deal is incredibly useful. Now, granted, it is usually not that exciting for the media, who is looking for bigger, more exciting trends to bubble up. But I find by having a constant piece of content that houses all those stats, the sexy stuff, the very tactical stuff, the strategic stuff, all by one thought leadership platform, that A, you don't disintermediate, B, you don't send anyone down a rabbit hole away from you. And finally, when you're actually trying to get people's attention about that, you have a singular viewpoint that reflects to you the best way possible. And I find that for journalists, it's so much easier if you're citing just one set of research than having them have to fact check several different pieces of news. And Eric and Lisa, I don't know if that's been how you've seen it when you've been either at Information Week or Bloomberg or CNBC, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Lisa, go ahead.
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges that people face is they don't know necessarily what to talk about. They want to do thought leadership, but they haven't decided, what do I want to talk about? I mean, do I want to talk about this issue or that issue, or, whatever it is? And the shortcut to doing that is, I talk people through content strategy, and I ask them, it's like, okay, so in this, you're bringing up some of these issues and these trends. What are people saying that you agree with, and why do you agree with it? And, try to get them to say something unique, right? Okay, let's go through this process and let's find a piece of this conversation that we can own. The other part is, what is it that people are not saying out there that you think needs to be said, or needs to be said more often? So, and what you see as a journalist when you're in an editorial decision-making role, which I was, is, do you understand that we need to bring new ideas to our audience, or a new take on an existing topic, for example? So we want something that's going to advance that conversation.
A lot of CEOs today, they're expected to say the right thing at the right time, the right occasion. There's a tremendous pressure on that, and often they have a keynote, and thought leadership is a key part about that. But Curtis is absolutely right. And asking them, what are you passionate about? Okay, you have a certain level of expertise, you have a certain level of knowledge. I know you sell this stuff, but actually, what do you really care about? And really good thought leadership combines both the credible content with the passion. And that's why I think, conferences, webinars, getting back to this debate format, getting back to the conversation post-COVID is really helpful for thought leadership, because it's bringing back the stories, it's bringing back the human passion, it's bringing back the element that brings it to life. And I think that's what really good thought leadership is, only a platform for a great conversation. It's never an end in itself.
Ooh, should we end it there? That's almost like how you end it. Is someone says it's not the end, and we say, oh, haha, it is the end.
I figured if I said nothing, somebody would jump in. I didn't want to end with interrupting Laurence's great comments that way. I think you're right, Curtis. That's a great way to end it. Curtis, Lisa, Laurence, fantastic conversation. Appreciate everybody's time. Thank you all for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.